My first year at university taught me that sometimes real horror doesn't come from monsters or ghosts, but from ordinary people. People like Dale Peterson, my first roommate, who showed me how madness can wear a mask of normality. Our initial meeting should have been a warning. It was a Sunday move-in day at the dorm, the hallway filled with excited freshmen and parents helping with luggage. Dale was already in the room when I arrived, sitting perfectly still on his bed, staring at the wall. He didn't move when I entered, didn't respond to my hello. He just sat there as if in a trance. After a few uncomfortable minutes, he finally turned his head, a mechanical movement, like a poorly programmed robot. His eyes were a faded blue, almost white, and he didn't blink at a normal rate. "Do you snore?" he asked, his voice monotone. When I answered no, he nodded slowly. "Good. I hate noises during my observation." I should have requested a room transfer that very day. The first few days were strange but tolerable. Dale barely spoke, spending most of his time studying or using his laptop. His only apparent quirks were an obsession with organization. Everything on his side of the room had to be at perfect 90-degree angles, and his habit of murmuring quietly while typing. It was in the second week that things started to become truly disturbing. I woke up in the middle of the night with that feeling. You know, that instinctive certainty that you're being watched. Dale was sitting on his bed, completely upright, staring at me in the darkness. The faint glow from his laptop charger illuminated his face from below, casting shadows that made his smile seem impossibly wide. "Is everything okay?" I asked, my voice hoarse from sleep. "Shh," he replied without blinking. "I'm collecting data." The next morning, he acted as if nothing had happened. When I mentioned the incident, he seemed genuinely confused. "You must have dreamed it," he said, but there was something in his tone, a note of cruel amusement, that made me doubt him. I started to notice small changes in my belongings. Objects slightly out of place, files on my laptop that had been opened, clothes that seemed to have been worn. I set a new password on my computer, but somehow he always managed to gain access. One night, I pretended to sleep so I could observe him. For nearly 3 hours, he sat on his bed, typing frantically. Every now and then, he would pause to look at me, tilting his head to the side like a curious bird. At one point, he silently got up and walked over to my bed. I struggled to keep my breathing steady as he stood there, motionless, studying me. I could smell his breath, a sweet, rotten scent like spoiled fruit. He reached out, almost touching my face, then stopped. "Not yet," he whispered. "I need more data." The next morning, while he was in class, I violated his privacy, something I'm ashamed of, but at that point it felt necessary. His laptop was locked, but I found notebooks under his mattress, dozens of them, filled with tiny, frantic handwriting. They were observations about me. Every move I made was documented. When I slept, ate, breathed, there were detailed diagrams of my face, analyses of my bone structure, and something even more disturbing, plans for improvements he wanted to make. "The specimen shows inconsistent sleep patterns," one entry read. "Possible need for surgical adjustments to optimize rest." I requested a room transfer that same day. Thankfully, the dorm administration didn't ask too many questions. I moved to another building on campus that very afternoon while Dale was in class. I didn't leave a new address, didn't tell anyone where I went. For 2 weeks, everything was peaceful. I started to relax, sleep better. My new roommate was normal. He liked sports, had a girlfriend, slept through the night. Then the emails started. From different addresses each time, but I knew it was him. They were just data, times, coordinates, clinical observations about my new routine. He was still watching me, from somewhere, somehow. "The specimen exhibits a false sense of security," the last email read. "Behavioral patterns returning to normal. Ideal moment to resume the study is approaching." On the third night after that email, I woke up to the sound of someone trying to unlock my door, the metallic click of tools working on the lock. I called campus security immediately. They caught Dale in the hallway. In his backpack, they found a lock-picking kit, syringes filled with some kind of sedative, and surgical instruments. In his new room, the police found something even worse. The walls were covered in photos, not just of me, but of other students as well. All former roommates of his at different universities. In the pictures, we were all asleep, unaware of the nocturnal observer. There were notebooks for each of us, detailing plans for experiments he intended to conduct. The most disturbing part was the videos found on his computer, hours-long nighttime recordings of his former roommates sleeping. On certain nights, he performed small tests, injecting substances into the sleepers, making tiny incisions to study skin response, even carrying out minor procedures while the victims were drugged. Dale was arrested and committed to a psychiatric institution. Doctors diagnosed him with a rare form of psychosis, worsened by an obsessive interest in improving the human species. Apparently, he saw himself as some kind of scientist, conducting experiments to optimize his roommates. They discovered he had been expelled from 3 previous universities, always after incidents involving his roommates. But somehow, he managed to transfer to another institution and restart his study with new victims. Now I live off campus. I have my own apartment, multiple security cameras, and I take medication to sleep. But sometimes I still wake up with that feeling, those faded blue eyes watching me in the dark. Last week I received an email from an unknown address. Just one line. Study temporarily interrupted. Resumption expected soon. Specimen exhibits interesting patterns of post-experiment trauma. The institution where Dale is confined assures me he has no access to computers, that the email must be a sick joke, that he is sedated, restrained, incapable of continuing his studies. But every night before I go to sleep, I double-check every window, every door, because now I know sometimes the real monsters don't hide under the bed. They sleep in the bed next to you, watching, studying, waiting for the right moment to conduct their experiments. What did you think of this story? Comment on what impacted you the most. Now let's move on to the next one. Some memories cling to you like parasites, growing and feeding on your deepest fears. That night at Black Lake is one of those memories I can't tear from my mind, no matter how much time passes. Every time I hear branches snapping in the dark, I'm transported back to that bonfire, to that moment when we realized we weren't alone. It was a typical Friday night in college. Ethan, Lucas, and I had decided to escape the chaos of campus to drink in peace. Black Lake was only a 15-minute drive away, isolated enough that we wouldn't be disturbed, but close enough not to be concerning. We arrived at dusk. The place was deserted as always. We set up our small bonfire on the lake's shore, in a clearing we already knew well. It was our secret spot, where we had been coming for months to escape the monotony of college life. The first signs that something was wrong came subtly. The sound of footsteps in the vegetation, not the usual noises of small animals, but something heavier, more deliberate. Lucas was the first to notice. "Do you guys hear that?" he asked, lowering his beer. The footsteps seemed to circle our clearing, always staying in the shadows beyond the reach of the firelight. "It's probably some animal," Ethan replied, but his voice betrayed his uncertainty. The 3 of us knew that animals don't move like that, with such a systematic, so intentional pattern. For almost an hour, we tried to ignore it. We talked louder, turned up the music on the phone, pretended the growing knot in our stomachs was just the effect of the alcohol. But the footsteps continued, sometimes retreating for a few minutes, only to return even closer. That's when the first branch fell into our fire. Thick, still with green leaves, not the kind that falls naturally. It had been torn off and thrown with enough force to send embers flying across the clearing. "Hey!" Ethan shouted into the darkness. "Is someone there?" The silence that followed was deafening. Even the insects seemed to have gone quiet. And then, coming from the opposite direction of where the first branch had been thrown, another projectile cut through the air. This branch was larger, heavier, and it hit Lucas directly in the face. The impact was so strong that he fell backward, blood trickling from a cut above his eyebrow. It wasn't an accident. It had been a calculated attack aimed specifically at his head. Panic took over. We abandoned everything. Backpacks, beers, even Ethan's phone, which was still playing. Music. The darkness of the forest, which had once seemed welcoming, had now turned into a labyrinth of shadows and terror. We ran toward the car, tripping over roots, branches whipping against our faces. The footsteps followed us, now without any attempt at discretion. Heavy, fast, coming from multiple directions, as if there was more than one pursuer. "They're surrounding us," Lucas shouted, still clutching his bleeding face. And he was right. The sounds came from the left, the right behind us, forcing us down a single possible path deeper into the forest, taking us further from the car. That's when we heard the laughter. It wasn't normal human laughter. It was something guttural, primal, as if someone were mimicking the sound of amusement without truly understanding what it meant. Somehow we managed to reach the car. My hands were shaking so much that I could barely hold the keys. The laughter was closer now, accompanied by a wet sound, like something large being dragged through the vegetation. "Start the damn thing!" Ethan screamed from the back seat, trying to stop Lucas's bleeding. That was when I saw it. Through the rearview mirror, illuminated by the reverse lights, a figure emerged from the forest. It was far too tall to be human, its limbs long and disproportionate. It wore what looked like dark rags, soaked in some kind of liquid that shimmered in the artificial light. Its face was just a shadow deeper than the night. The engine finally roared to life. I hit the gas, tires skidding on the wet dirt. In the mirror, I saw the figure start running after us. It wasn't a normal run. It was as if its limbs bent at impossible angles, propelling it forward at a terrifying speed. I drove like a madman back to campus, ignoring every speed limit. That thing followed us for nearly 2 kilometers before vanishing into the shadows. Lucas needed 12 stitches on his forehead. At the hospital, the doctors asked questions, but what explanation could we give? The campus police investigated, but they never found anything. Our story sounded like just another case of drunk students getting into trouble, but things didn't end that night. The following week, I started noticing something strange at the edge of the forest surrounding campus. A tall figure standing among the trees watching, always at dusk, always disappearing when cars passed. Ethan was the next to see it. He was walking back from a night class when he spotted something moving unnaturally between the buildings. When security went to check, they only found wet marks on the ground, as if someone drenched had walked through. Lucas was never the same again. The cut healed, but something in his mind broke that night. He dropped out of college, moved back in with his parents. Last I heard, he was in psychiatric treatment, insisting that they were still watching him. I stopped taking night classes. I avoid that side of campus entirely after sunset. But sometimes when I have to pass near the forest, I swear I can hear that laughter, that guttural sound of something trying to mimic human amusement. Last week I found something in my room that sent chills down my spine. A large branch, still covered in green leaves, placed perfectly in the center of my bed. It was wet, dripping a dark liquid that stained my sheets, and tied to it was a piece of the hoodie Lucas was wearing that night. I'm transferring to another university next semester, to a big city, far from any forests. But I know that no matter where I go, that night will follow me, because now I understand we weren't the ones who discovered that secret spot by the lake. It found us. And apparently it's not done with us yet. So if one night you find yourself near a forest and hear systematic, deliberate footsteps, followed by laughter that doesn't sound quite right, run. Run without looking back. Because if you see what's chasing you, if your eyes meet that shadow darker than the night, well, let's just say there are things in the forest that shouldn't exist, and they're always looking for more friends to play with. If you've enjoyed it so far, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. It really helps us a lot. Now let's go to the final story. Some decisions haunt you for the rest of your life. For me, it was accepting that invitation to the Phi Delta party. Not because of the party itself, fraternity parties are always a bit strange, but because of what happened afterward. Because of what is still happening. It was one of those underground parties that happen after campus curfew. The fraternity house was far from the main dorms, a Victorian mansion that always seemed to be swallowed by shadows. From the moment I arrived, I could tell something was different. The music was too low, the people too quiet, as if everyone was waiting for something. That's when he approached me. I had never seen that guy before. He looked older than the Other students, wearing a formal blazer that completely clashed with the setting. His smile was too wide, too rehearsed. "You look thirsty," he said, handing me a glass filled with something dark amber. "It's a special recipe, made especially for selected guests." I tried to politely decline, but he insisted. There was something in his eyes, an unsettling intensity like a predator fixated on its prey. "It would be an insult not to accept," he said, practically forcing the glass into my hand. "All special guests drink." I looked around for familiar faces, but all I saw were vacant expressions staring at me. Some people were smiling, but their smiles were strange, as if they were following a script. I took a small sip, hoping it would satisfy him. The liquid had a metallic taste, leaving my tongue numb. Immediately I felt dizzy. The lights grew brighter, the sounds more distant. "Perfect," I heard his voice, now seeming to come from far away. "It's working faster than usual." I tried to stand up to look for help, but my legs wouldn't respond. The last thing I saw before blacking out was that smile, now impossibly wide, revealing too many teeth, too sharp. I woke up in a dark room, lying on an unfamiliar bed. My head was pounding, and there was a horrible taste in my mouth. That's when I heard it. Sounds coming from the closet. Something moving, scratching the wood from the inside out. The sound grew louder, more persistent. Whatever was inside that closet wanted to get out. Or maybe it wanted me to go in. I managed to get up, stumbling toward the door. It was locked. That's when the closet door began to open, slowly. In the darkness, I could see something moving. A humanoid shape, but horribly wrong. Too long. With limbs that bent at impossible angles, panic gave me strength. I threw myself against the door with all the force I could muster. On the third attempt, the lock gave way. I ran through the unfamiliar hallway, down the stairs, almost falling several times. I found my roommate Jake on the first floor. He had come looking for me after I didn't answer his messages. "Dude, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." We left immediately. On the way back to the dorm, I told him what I could remember. Jake's face turned serious. "There's something wrong with that fraternity," he said. "Last year, 3 freshmen disappeared after parties there. The police investigated, but they never found anything. I thought it was over, that it had just been a terrifying experience caused by some kind of drug. I was so wrong." The knocks started 3 days later, always at night, always exactly at 3:33. Rhythmic, deliberate knocks on my dorm room door. When I checked, the hallway was empty. Jake never heard anything. He said I was being paranoid because of the party. But then I started seeing things around campus. That same man in the blazer, always at a distance, always wearing that wrong smile. When others looked in his direction, he would simply not be there anymore. One night I finally saw him clearly. He was at the end of the hallway when the knocking began. His form was different now, more elongated, as if his proportions had been stretched. When he noticed I was watching, he smiled, that same grin, full of sharp teeth, and stepped into the communal bathroom. I don't know what possessed me, but I followed. The bathroom was dark, only one flickering light. All the stalls were empty, but on the floor, a pair of black boots, perfectly aligned, as if someone were standing inside. Them. But no one was there. That's when I heard the laughter. It was a laugh that shouldn't exist, too high-pitched, too ancient, like the sound of shattering glass mixed with the deranged amusement of a maniac. It came from all directions at once, echoing off the bathroom walls. The boots started to move on their own, taking steps toward me. The laughter grew louder, more hysterical. In the fogged-up mirror, I saw a reflection. Not mine, but his. His face was different now. His skin stretched over bones that moved unnaturally, that smile now taking up half of his face. "You didn't. Finish your drink." His voice spoke directly into my mind. "Special guests must finish what they start." I ran. I ran like I had never run before. I locked myself in my room, pushed the dresser against the door. Jake found me like that the next morning, shaking, mumbling about empty boots and impossible laughter. I transferred to another university the following week. I moved to a different state, changed my phone number, deleted my email. But some things follow you no matter how far you run. Every night at 3:33, I hear knocking on my door. When I check the security cameras I installed, all I see is static. but I know he's there. Sometimes I find glasses filled with amber liquid, in impossible places, inside locked cabinets on my desk in my locked room. Last week I got an email from Jake. Phi Delta was shut down after more people went missing. During the investigation, they found a hidden basement. The walls were covered in photos, dozens of students over the years, all with the same empty stare, all holding the same kind of glass. At the center of the basement was a table with empty glasses, each with a name engraved at the bottom. Jake said he saw mine. Next to it, a full glass of amber liquid still untouched, and on the wall above the table, written in something the investigators refused to identify, "Special guests always finish their drinks, always." Now I'm hearing knocking again, not at the door. This time it's coming from the closet. And even through the wood, I can feel that smile. That grin, filled with too many, too sharp teeth. I think tonight I'll have to finish my drink. If this story gave you chills and made you think twice before accepting an unexpected invitation, we want to hear your opinion. Which part scared you the most? Have you ever experienced something similar? Leave your story in the comments. Who knows, it might appear in one of our next videos. And don't forget, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any new terrifying stories. Share this story with those who love a good mystery. And check out our other videos filled with real horror stories that will make you question what truly lurks in the darkness.